My name is Prashanti Madiredd. I am the Senior Director for EBS QA team. Today we are going to talk about testing Oracle e-business suite best practices from the product development group. This is our usual safe harbor statement. A brief look at the agenda. We will be covering what are the testing challenges that we face and how to test. In this section we cover the recommendations from the EBS QA team and leveraging automation, some of the tools that we have within Oracle that will help you to leverage the testing solution and also optimize your testing efforts or reduce the testing efforts drastically. And finally, a thank you slide. So the testing challenges that we face in a QA community usually, the first one is called the iron triangle of the product development. In the product development organization, during the product development life cycle, optimizing any of these three attributes will have direct impact on the quality. Either you reduce number of weeks from your schedule or resources assigned to the project, you will definitely see an impact on the quality. While keeping the schedule and the resources constant, you increase the scope of the product, then also you will see an impact on the quality. So let's see how some of the recommendations that we give make the iron triangle into an elastic triangle. The other challenge that we often face is that 30 to 50% of the effort in an upgrade usually goes into the testing. And of that, typically 1/3 of the effort goes into the preparation, 1/3 of the goes into the performing the testing, and the remaining 1/3 goes into evaluating the results. And when I tell my customers or partners that the effort is 30 to 50%, they always say that I'm being conservative and the effort is much more higher than that. Apart from that, we also see that 40 to 60% of the cost goes in testing the deployed applications during the upgrade. What is the cost of fixing an error? It goes exponentially high post-release compared to the bug that has been caught during the development. So the earlier we find the bug, the lesser the cost. Now, we've been talking about the cost of testing, cost of fixing, but what happens if we don't test enough? Is there any cost for it? So let's look at what is the cost of not testing enough. Remember this, the Facebook, when it went IPO in May 2012, there has been a technical glitch in the NASDAQ software. For about 19 minutes, 30,000 records have been stuck and there has been an issue with the IPO for the Facebook. And NASDAQ had to pay $10 million to Facebook as a fine for what has happened. And the most recent one is when we were supposed to complete the registrations for the Obamacare, the website went down for 4 hours. So sometimes the cost is money, sometimes the cost is time. So how do we address this? Okay, let's look at some of the recommendations from the EBS QA team to our customers and partners. These are the things that we do day in and day out in our testing, and we recommend to our customers and partners as well. So let's look at what are the different methods to test. While there are quite a lot of methods to test, I'm picking up 5 here today to talk more in detail. So the first one is people. The basic sanity of the system is what we're going to test first. So can the users log into the application? Can they navigate between screens? Can they perform basic operations? From there till a thorough functional testing of checking the end-to-end flows and whether the functionality works fine for a product. And then is the process. We are not testing here the process of testing, but we are testing here the process of the flows that are there in the product and how efficiently are we testing them. And the other one is governance. There are quite a few policies that need to be maintained because of the federal and the regulatory updates that we have, and are we maintaining those policies during our testing? Then the technology. The system always gets tightly coupled with the technology. So whenever there is a change in the technology, are we testing the system enough is what we're going to focus here. And finally, the data. This is something that is often overlooked and not given enough importance, but has a lot of impact if it's not being taken care of. So moving on to people. So the functional testing is what we're talking in the people segment. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is a theme-based testing. Whenever there is a new feature that is introduced in a product, ideally we would test the feature entirely. But how does that feature affect various application features that are available is something that needs to be tested, and that's where we call that please ensure that you test it based on themes instead of testing by the feature. And when you test the theme, identify a theme, identify the impacted areas for the theme and all the integrations across. A simple example for testing a theme could be testing all the messages with some attachments, right? A message could have an attachment like a Word document, an Excel file, a picture. Within a picture, you could have a JPG or a PNG file. So see how the transactions happen when there is a message with an attachment. A little more complex scenario could be having a theme of period closure in GL. So whenever there is a period closure in GL, how does it impact your inventory, your projects, your financial related book closures? So verify all of them as a theme. And a more complex theme for customers and partners could be wherein you have mergers and acquisitions. So when you bring in a new product, see how does that new product fits into the entire gamut of applications you have here. So if you have a product, you need to ensure that your vendor management is fine, your recruitment is going on fine, your inventory is working fine, whether the warehouse management system is working fine or not with the new product bought in place is something that needs to be verified. The other aspect of functional testing that we recommend is exploratory testing. Within our own organization, when we test, we find that exploratory testing is much more productive in terms of finding bugs compared to a scripted testing. While we say that it is not that we say scripted testing is of no use, we would have scripted testing, and along with it we would include the exploratory testing. So what exploratory testing means? As the name suggests, it is exploring the system. If you take a tourist metaphor, it could be like you have gone to a new place, you would like to explore the new place. So what are the various ways that you would go and explore the new place? Maybe you would hire a guide and then you would take a guided tour for all the museums that are there in the new place, or you will take a tour bus and go and visit all the important or interesting places in the new city that you have been. Similarly, when you do exploratory testing, identify a scenario based on which you would start your testing. Once you start a scenario, identify various patterns during that scenario and bring in variations. A simple scenario to consider: for any application, when we start testing, when you look at the scripted testing, the first step that you would see is start the application. So how do we start the application? Usually you go and double click on the icon to start the application, but you could go to a start menu, choose the program and launch the application. You could go to a browser, give the details of the application and launch the application. You could use a shortcut to launch the application. You could use mouse to launch the application. You can have keyboard to launch the application. And while I'm launching the application, do I have other applications open, or how much memory I should have? So there are various aspects that come into picture, but we usually do only one specific pattern. So can we look at that pattern and inject variations in terms of what are all the various scenarios we have listed so far? And while we do that, also include vulnerable business areas. Maybe one of the vulnerable areas in starting the application could be using a keyboard, wherein accessibility could be checked in. This is one of the regulatory requirements that most of the applications need to be maintained. So that is one of the vulnerable areas that you could possibly find out while injecting that. And derived exploratory testing. What we mean by derived exploratory testing is test an application in iterations. So once you start testing, you have recorded your feedback, analyze the feedback for results, and then use that analysis as an input for the second iteration. So you scope your tests, you run the tests, record the results, analyze the results, and that analysis should form the input for scoping your test in the next iteration, and it goes on. Moving on to process. If you have multiple products which have a process that is cutting across, first ensure that you test each of these products in complete before going to test the process that cuts across all these products. Let's see what happens if you don't test each of the product completely. If you have a flow that cuts across multiple products and I am testing first different products individually, if each of the product is tested 95%, does it mean the entire application is tested 95%? No. let's see what happens. When I test the product 1 with the 95%, the not tested percentage would be 5%. But as I move on to across one product to the other, my not tested portion would be going up till 23%. This is a huge risk that we are taking. So first of all, complete testing each and every product entirely, and then move on to testing the process flow along with the integrations and the stage gates. By stage gates, I mean the entry and the exit criteria. When you move on from one product to the other product through the process flow, ensure if your exit criteria has been met and your entry criteria is also available for you to go to the next product. Let's take a simple example of quote to shipment. This particular process has different products that are involved in the process, cuts across about 4-5 products, and if you have to do a testing of this, you would probably be running all the steps that are listed here. Now whenever there is a change in the product or in the process, you will have to test the entire flow again. Now usually the changes that happen in the application would be either a UI change or a design change due to the business logic, that is underlying business logic involved. So usually the design changes are much more significant compared to the UI changes in terms of the percentage of change that comes into the application. Now whenever there is a change in the design or whenever there is a change in the business logic for the flow, it is important that you test the entire flow in full and ensure that the flow is working fine without any regressions. Now if you test this flow using the UI, it would take several hours to complete the testing, especially when you have multiple data sets that you need to use. In such situations, we recommend to use web services which would have similar mapping for the steps that you have already put in for the process flow, map with the same web services and do the testing. You could also automate the existing flow to run to save the time using the UI, but if you have a set of 50 records, the same flow that you see on the left hand side running through UI would take about 5 hours, but with the same set of 50 records, if you run the flow using the web services listed on the right side, you would take about 50 seconds. That's a huge reduction in the execution effort. Now moving on to the policies that needs to be maintained under governance, the first policy that usually we discuss is about the role-based testing. Now role-based testing is something that is required to ensure that various business roles that we have in the organization are taken care of when performing those transactions in the application. The usual practice is to attach all the responsibilities to a single user and perform the testing by switching multiple responsibilities. But this will affect the transaction data that is flowing between one user to the other user and the workflow notifications and the approvals that are available in the hierarchy. So it is always recommended that you create users based on the roles that are existing in the organization and attach the responsibilities that are relevant to each role and perform end-to-end flows. This is very important to ensure all the transactions are being moved from one user to the other user and the approvals are taken care. A simple use case for role-based testing: for a requisition, if I have 3 different users, purchasing manager, buyer and a receiving clerk, create 3 different users in the application, attaching specific roles for each one of them, and ensure that from raising the requisition till receiving the goods, it is being performed by different users at each stage, and the information is flowing across within each of these users. Okay. The other one is security, the policies that needs to be maintained. This is important to ensure that the system protects the data and the process that are intended for each of the audience at various roles. And the primary thing that needs to be taken into consideration here is the integrity of the data is maintained across all these processes that we follow and throughout all the times. The confidentiality of the data is maintained, that is the data that is important to be shown only to a particular user is supposed to be shown to that user, and the data is available for that user whenever they log into the system. And non-repudiation, the sender sends the information and the receiver receives the information, and there is always a transaction that's happening with any without any issues. So what is it that we primarily recommend to test here? While we test the entire security aspects of the application, whenever you have an integration with a third-party application and you call the system using the third-party application, ensure that the URLs are all encrypted, and then you would not be able to spoof the URLs. Okay. With the technology updates that we are giving in the EBS application, the new innovation that we have made in EBS 12.2 is the online patching feature. So the earlier patching facilities that we had to ensure that you need to bring down the system, apply the patches, and ensure that your application works fine the same way depending on how it was working earlier and the patches that you have applied. So if you have a feature for which you apply the patches, you ensure the bug fixes are all working fine and there are no regressions in the impacted areas because of the patches that have come into the application. Now with online patching, you have the application running and you just bring it down only for the cutover. So what do we do during the online patching? When you are upgrading your application from any of the previous releases to EBS 12.2, during the upgrade, ensure all your business flows are working fine and your customizations are good enough to go ahead with the functionality that is defined for your application. During online patching, we suggest that you need to test the concurrent programs and some of the functionality that is restricted to be executed during online patching. One such feature is executing your payroll runs. We restrict it because in case you have any patches that changes the payroll calculations, it doesn't make sense for us to run the reports before and find issues. So any of those restricted programs have to be verified during the online patching that the system is restricting those. Also verify the seed data and the impacted files because of online patching. The other important issue to be covered is your customizations to see that they are not impacted because of the online patching. And once the patching is over and the cutover is done, ensure all your features are working the way they are intended to work, verify the customizations, and also check for concurrent request resumption. Now, so this is the user perspective of the EBS application, but this is how it looks for EBS QS perspective. Application is only a tip of an iceberg, or the changes that are made in the application are only tip of an iceberg, and the complexity of the application lies below the surface. Whenever there is a change in any of these tech stack components, there is a change in the application. And we from EBS QA ensure that any of these changes will not impact the application and we deliver a quality product to our customers and partners. All that we request our customers and partners and recommend them to do testing is only the changes that come in the application, because each implementation is different and each implementation has their own customizations and you could have impact on the change in the application. So any change in a browser, any change in the database version or a tech stack middleware version is all taken care by us, verifying that none of these impact the application that we are delivering. So moving on to data. This is one of the important aspects that is often overlooked during the testing. There are two aspects of looking at how do we actually go about identifying the data for testing. Do we use the synthetic data or do we use the production data? We recommend to use both. Whenever you have a narrowly based test or during the earlier stages of implementation, it is recommended you could go with synthetic data. But as and when you move into the later versions of implementation and you start testing the entire application, it is recommended you use the production data. But the production data has a lot of information that is confidential and you would really not want to share it with the testing users. So how do we identify the data and provide to the test users so that the confidentiality is maintained? So what you need to do is first identify all the sensitive information that you really do not want to be shared with the users. Something like your social security number or date of birth or salary details. So identify such information, and we have tools for data masking which basically run some algorithms and masks the data and turns them into some other format of the data which will still make meaningful data to do the testing, but the confidentiality of the information is maintained. And then run the subsetting algorithms where you can choose data based on the business groups or certain conditions that you would want to choose, and take a subset of the data and then inject variation into the data. The reason we recommend to inject variation in data is even when you take the cutoff from production data, there is a possibility not all the conditions have been met, and it is recommended you verify the boundaries, beyond boundaries, and any limits that have been set for the data, verify all of them and ensure that the data is giving the results that are required to be given in the situations that you have identified. So, simple example about data subsetting and data masking. If you see on the left hand side, we have about 4 records, and when I do data subsetting, I choose only 2 records that I want to use for testing. And if you look at the salary data, the data has been masked. The data is useful for testing, but it is not actually giving the right data that is there in the production information. Now, we have been talking of injecting variation starting from functional testing to the test data. So, while going through some of the testing literature, I found this quote and thought it's important to share with all of you, right? Take a moment to go through it. Okay, moving on. So, we have seen different methods to test, and it is really overwhelming. We know that it is important to do the testing, but where is the time and where is the money to do the testing of all that we have discussed so far in the short time that is available for us to release the product or to implement the product? So, here comes in some of the solutions that are available within Oracle Application Testing Suite that we would like to bring up and help you to optimize your testing effort. So, the solutions that we have within Oracle Application Quality Management are available at database layer, at middle tier layer, and at application layer. But I am going to focus only on the application layer where we have tools to test the application. So, one such product that we have is Oracle Application Testing Suite. Oracle Application Testing Suite has 3 different products: Oracle Functional Testing Suite, Oracle Load Testing Suite, and Test Manager. Test Manager is used to plan and schedule your tests, defect tracking, and ensure that your repositories are maintained based on the releases that you are testing. Load testing is basically used for load and performance testing and to set benchmarks at each level that you're executing the performance tests. And functional testing is where we're going to focus on, where we cover a lot of functional and regression testing. Along with it comes a feature called Flow Builder and also Starter Pack that we have given in last year. So, let's take a look at Oracle Functional Testing Suite. Oracle Functional Testing Suite initially had only the OpenScript, where you had record and playback feature and some advanced scripting using Java. So, you could use conditions and loops and create your automation tests. On top of it is what we have given a new feature called Flow Builder, which is an automation framework which helps you to generate your test automatically using this framework. This framework is a keyword driven framework which is user intuitive keywords helped to define the components and automate the product functionality. On top of it, for EBS customers, we are giving the pre-built test content in terms of components, which are the logical business entities that could be grouped together to form flows. And you could use these components to create your own flows, or with the flows that we have given, you could use your own data, bind the data to the flows and generate the automated tests. This framework is easy to maintain. It supports customizations that you have done in the EBS application. You can have your business users generate these flows. You really do not need any technical knowledge to do this, and they are all data independent. Within our team in EBS QA, we've been using this framework for a few years now, and we've seen 60% of reduction in the test script generation effort. So, with the starter pack, we are giving the basic functionality that can be tested, something like a sanity or certification flows across all the EBS applications, financials, HCM, procurement, SCM, CRM. So, all the product families that we have 3,600 components and 230 flows that span across all these products are available for testing. Now, what we are announcing is the advanced pack for 10 different products or product families, which are the niche products which stand alone and have complex integrations or complex features that needs to be tested when you implement the product. For each of these products, we have about 70 to 90% coverage, the only exception being incentive compensation, where we have 100% coverage. By coverage here, I mean that it is basically covered for the number of screens that are available in the application for which we are providing the components. Okay. Let's take a look at case studies that are available for Flow Builder. So last year we have announced the Flow Builder, and we have some customers and partners who have adopted it. So one such partner that we have been working with is Tech Mahindra. It's testing services organization within the Tech Mahindra group have had business challenges of not having the business users time or reusability or maximizing the scripts that they have in the previous release to the current release, and more coverage in terms of automation. And by using Flow Builder, they overcome these challenges, and they found that they could jumpstart the testing, and it is a simple way of creating tests and does not need enough time from the business users, but could develop the scripts from coordination between business and automation users and get the scripts ready within short frame of time. And they reduce the test design effort by 60%, maintenance effort by 40%, overall test effort by 30%. So Ajay Bonham from Tech Mahindra says that it optimizes the test efforts, increases productivity up to 70%, and better ROI up to 40%. So one of the customer who has started implementing Flow Builder is First American, and Jake Westphal from First American says that Flow Builder provides significant time savings, offers flexibility to realign the scripts to suit our business needs. It can exist along with the existing current situation of record playback, and also generate the scripts using Flow Builder with the automated test framework that we have offered. So that's all we have covered so far on the testing challenges and what are the recommendations from the EBS QA team and the tools that are available. So thanks for joining me today. Thank you.